What show are we up to?
49.
This is show 49. I'm doing this while I'm looking at a PowerPoint that I've been working on. I haven't done any editing on it. The information is quite astounding, but what I should draw your attention to is look up Fukushima, and there's a bit of information coming out concerning the radiation, how it's affecting the trees, and because everyone's sound asleep in America, they've all been totally traumatized, I suppose, emotionally, to a point where they think it's normal. And as a result of that, you're slowly being poisoned with your vaccinations, with your chemtrails, with the waters, with the food, the GMO foods. And I wanted to explain a little bit about how the GMO food, and it's all been corrupted by the Israelis, or they aren't really Israelis, they are actually Khazar Jews, have taken over the United States government. Most churches worship the Jew, think that the Israelis are in Palestine bombing the shit out of the poor people, and we see occasionally little babies with the back of their heads blown off and the father's holding them in his arms. Can you imagine the horrors of that? And at the same time, we see the Jews, or so-called Jews, they're Khazars, they're not Jews, sitting watching from a distance as the bombs rain down from the jets and rockets, blowing people up. And they're sitting there sipping coffee and having a bit of a wine and chuckling about it. How the chosen people, this land has been promised them by God. Well, the reality is, of course, it's all invented. It's a Babylonian Talmud idea that you are an animal with hands, and they slaughter you, it doesn't matter. I've seen reports where a young Australian lady was standing in front of a tank trying to protect the house, and the tank ran straight over the top of it. It was a bulldozer, big Caterpillar bulldozer D9 or D10 or something. Now you say, well, why is this happening? Well, it is prophecy, and the prophecy is that when Jesus gets back, he won't be known as Jesus. Everyone thinks it's Jesus, but it isn't. It's the Comforter, it's the Father himself. Because the soul, as you see here in the picture, you see the Shroud of Turin on the left, and you see my face on the right. And then Ash took these photographs, and then what we've done is put the same veil that was over my head, or garment that was over my head, we put it on to the shroud to show you the similarity of facial structure. And this is what the Pope saw, and he studied it for 3 days, and he just thought, well, it's just too incredible, it's got to be true. And then we started communicating back and forwards. First off, he said to me, or said to Ash, I didn't speak to him, he said to Ash that there was an Australian come over there years ago and climbed up on the statue of David and hit it with a hammer, screaming out that he was Jesus. And now there's this other Australian coming along saying he's Jesus, like as if the two is related. I lost a little bit of faith in the intelligence of the Pope at that point. However, when he's seen the photographs which you're seeing here, he compared the structure of the face and concluded that there's no other option. Now, these I've done before. What I do is I put a PowerPoint together because many things are interrelated, and for those of you who are coming in for the first time listening to this program, you've got to go to our YouTubes and look at what I am looking at so I can explain it to you. Now, many of you may be familiar with the Emmanuel prophecy of Matthew 1:23 and how it relates to having a gematria of 8880. And if you don't know what gematria is, take your own name and change each letter to the number it's lined up with. For example, there's 26 letters in the English alphabet. Well, the same type of phenomena you see in Greek and Hebrew, and all ancient languages had gematria. In other words, when they built a city, if the king's name was whatever the value of his name was, that would be the height of the wall around the city, or be something like that. Or you've got the temple that's in Ezekiel and Revelation. These have numbers that are actually based on the dimensions of the earth and the 3168 number, which is Lord Jesus Christ in Greek. So you got the Lord is 800 value. Jesus has a value of 888 and Christ 1480. And the reason for that is that you have the first 8 letters of the Greek language alphabet, numbers 1 through to 80. The next 8, it jumps up by a value of 10. So you've got the second value, you've got 1 to 8, then you've got 10 to 80. Then you've got the third, which is from 100 to 800. So you get a number that's like Christ 1480. That's because it's made up of letters in the Greek that is higher value of numbers, being further along the alphabet, if you like. So Jesus is 888, and Lord is 800. Now, you see here Mercury and Mars and Saturn total 16.94, and this is on January 11th, 1944. Now, the Pope himself hasn't seen any of this. He just saw the emails that we were sending back and forwards. It was his idea to use emails rather than a live phone. And it was good because, although he didn't realise it, not being a man familiar with computers and how they store information, we were able to copy and store all of the emails and questions and answers. So what we have then is the word Emmanuel. It's only found once in the New Testament. It's in Matthew 1:23, and it's got a value of 1694 in the James Strong's Concordance of the King James Bible. Now what the concordance is like a dictionary of the New and Old Testament, Greek and Hebrew and Chaldean Aramaic. So we have the distances measured from Jupiter. Why? Because it's 88,800 miles across. And then you measure from Jupiter to Venus, Jupiter to Mercury, Jupiter to the Sun, Jupiter to the Earth, Mars and Saturn. And the total is 31.68 astronomical units. Now later in this talk, I'll show you how, and this is where you should go and watch it on the YouTube. I'll show you how the particular software I use is non-online, but when it was manufactured, the software, for example, this one you're looking at, it was done recently when the effect of the solar system crossing the equator of the Milky Way galaxy pushed all of the planets out at different distances. So with the same program, because it's now based on the information fed into it and no one's talking about the orbits have been changed, the moon's flipping upside down, this kind of thing. So the programmers unknowingly take the information of the planets and then put it into their program, and you have to do it 2 or 3 times, and it will calculate the movement of those particular planets and their orbits and so forth. And then they can predict the future or go back in the past. With this program, if you go back in the past, all the measurements are out. Now, prior to 2011. But with it, you go back using on the configuration of the solar system today and the distances out to these planets, which are, as I said, are all altered. In fact, as I'm speaking to you, the distance to Pluto is 31.68 astronomical units. But if you look it up in this program, it's not saying that at all. It's saying 32 something or other. So the original one, which is home planet, non-online, so it's got no information fed to it, it's just taking as it was for the last thousands of years, that so far as the astronomers are concerned, that this is the position of the planets and distances to the sun or to each other. So I use Jupiter because it's 88,800 miles across, and that's the Emmanuel prophecy, Matthew 1:23. It has a value in Greek of gematria 8880. Okay, so I'll see if we can sort of explain that as we go along. So the Star of Bethlehem was a conjunction. That means they lined up, with Venus aligning with Jupiter over Bethlehem at 8 a.m. approximately. It was actually 8:02 and 8:04, somewhere around there. Now M42 was a brilliant pink nebula in the belt of Orion. Now I'll go back to 1997-98 when I was in Melbourne. I was living with Mary Magdalene at the time, and everyone reincarnates, so Mary Magdalene you would think that she'd come back to be my wife as she was when I walked the earth as Jesus. So everyone comes back, and there's a reason for that, and it's very difficult to explain in a few minutes, but it's all to do with genetics and the offspring and her age difference between she and I. I'll give you one example of that. She is 1162.6 days younger than I, and that's the width of the antechamber going into the Great Pyramid, and the Great Pyramid is predicted by Isaiah, which is correct. One of the few Old Testament prophets you can rely on, and has maintained with alterations, as Job has been altered and Genesis is altered and so forth, by the Babylonians, Jews who took over the Holy Lands, if you like, and were the false Jews. This is a reference to them in John 8:44. You are of the father, the devil. He was a murderer from the beginning, blah, blah, blah. And then you look the concordance number up for 844, and in Greek it is spontaneous of your own accord. So even the important verses, the verse numbers line up with the concordance numbers, which is basically a dictionary, just like you'd have an Oxford dictionary or whatever. And you can read the numbers in alphabetical order, because each word of the Old Testament, 8674 words, each is numbered. So you've got 8674. So you look up any particular number you want, and if it's a verse number or if it's a value of a verse in English or Greek gematria, and this is where all the secrets are, by William Shakespeare and James the 6th of Scotland, who became James the 1st of England. Very, very educated people, and they were aware completely, because they were Catholic, that the Freemasons were slowly taking over and had taken over the Vatican, or the Rome at that time. The Vatican as of 1929. So what we have then is Nicolas de Parsec. He discovered the M42 on the 26th of November 1610, and then after a few days he could no longer see it. He was using the same telescope given to him by his friend Galileo, who had meticulously looked at the belt of Orion and the planets, in particular Jupiter. He could see the 4 moons, and he estimated that they made 1,000 revolutions around Jupiter in a year, which again, 1,000 or 1 is God. And of course, the width of the planet is 88,860 miles. So all these things I'll go into, and or have already gone into, if it's not in this PowerPoint, because I am doing a lot of work and I'm trying to give you some idea what's going on, but it is very complex, and only the really smart people will get it. Anyhow, the M42 I was observing in Melbourne in the late 1990s, 97, 98, and the belt of Orion in Orion, the Orion Nebula took up 1/3 of the sky. If you look at it today, it'd be lucky to take up a hand width held at arm's length. So we're not getting closer or further away. What it is the heavens are really an optical illusion. You wouldn't expect a chimpanzee to see what you can see. So when people look out into space and they see these wonderful things happening, like the Doppler effect, indicating the Earth is not the centre of all creation. It is somewhere where the Big Bang has happened, because this is a total assumption. They've got to make up some way of creating the universe at the beginning. So instead of being a creative thought, they want to say, well, it's a Big Bang, and they get the Doppler effect showing blue or green or red, meaning the constellations or stars are moving away or coming towards you. So therefore they can calculate back to one point in space where the Big Bang occurred, which is utter nonsense. So we've got 2 Peter 3:10, but the day of the Lord will come as a thief in the night. So what's that mean? In which the heavens shall pass away. I'm just talking about that. With a great noise. And the elements shall melt with fervent heat. The earth also and the works that are therein shall be burned up. So what they're doing, the Jews are doing in Fukushima, they are exercising what is known as the Samson option. Now the Samson option is, they know that Christ is back. Everybody else doesn't know, but they do, because they're the ones that are the demonized, that are what the book of Revelation is actually talking about. And that is that seeing then, this is lining up with 2 Peter 3:10 and 11, 12, 13. Seeing then that all these things shall be dissolved, what manner of persons ought ye to be in all holy conversation and godliness, looking for and hasting unto the coming of the day of God. Now, it's not saying the day of the Lord, this is saying the day of God, because Jesus was a baby born of a virgin, because the soul of Jesus, and Muhammad had this right. Of course, he had to be put out of his misery too, so the Jews killed him and then rewrote what he had written into what is today what's called the Quran, which is total bullshit. But he had it right. And he said, and spread Islam by telling all of the kings and rulers of the countries around Arabia that he had read information that was written by people who were alive at the time. Caiaphas, for example, the man who said that he was retiring after he had crucified Jesus because he was the Messiah. He was the head of the Sanhedrin out of Babylon. So he had said that he was in his room, office, with his wife and father-in-law, and all of a sudden Jesus shows up, and this is after the crucifixion, and says, yeah, well, this had to be, and therefore not to worry about it, but he got an evil heart. So from that point onwards, he was totally melting through the floor, because he had in fact crucified the Messiah. So this is what Muhammad had read. So you've got these scatterings of words that are in the New Testament and Old Testament. Some of them are attributed to Paul, the false apostle, who never knew Jesus, come along 15 years after. He was a Pharisee, he was a lawyer, he grew up with Herod Agrippa, his wife was his sister, etc. So he dominates, because although there are things like this in 2 Peter 3:10 or other verses, 2 Peter is attributed to Peter the Apostle, but you don't know for sure. But we do know the day of God, wherein the heavens being on fire shall be dissolved, and the elements shall melt with fervent heat. How the hell would he even come up with something like that? Nevertheless, we, according to his promise, look for a new heavens and a new earth, wherein dwelleth righteousness. Now, this is what, of course, you would expect when God shows up. is going to be stopped at all costs, because as Jesus, born to a virgin, grew up in a hostile environment and had to take on the Jews at that time, who weren't real Jews, some of them were. Jews basically mean the descendant from the tribe of Judah, whereas most of the Jews were not. They were Idumean, half-breeds, if you like. So this is keeping the purity of the race is very important. That's why you got the Ku Klux Klan. Everyone jumps all over them for wanting to be Puritans, where in fact some media owned by the Jews are saying, well, we can't have that sort of thing. We want to mix you all up with the different races to make you non-white, because it's the non-white which are the promised people. Rather, the promised people are the white people. Nevertheless, we, according to his promise, look for a new heavens and a new earth, wherein dwelleth righteousness. The stars, therefore, must be specific with continued accuracy within the second. Come when I was reborn into Sydney, Australia on January 11th, 1944. Now, I'm going to show you shortly that with the original Home Planet program that I've had it for 20 years, and it's accurate, though it's not accurate today per se, unless it's to do with the moon in distances. But I won't go into too much detail on that to confuse you, just to say that you can measure the distances from the sun to the planets with the home planet, and it's extremely accurate. It's only after 2011 that it is not accurate. And we have to now go with the newer programs that were manufactured based on information of the distances to the stars after the approach of Nibiru, which is coming in, and the crossing of the Milky Way galaxy, which has caused water to drain down your sink backwards. So go and try that. Drain water out of your sink, and you'll find if you're in the northern hemisphere it's going anti-clockwise, and if you're in the southern hemisphere it's going clockwise, where it used to be the other way around before we crossed over the Milky Way galaxy. No one's telling you that, no one's talking about it. So the Comforter Jesus and the Father predicted was that the soul, which is Yahweh, the Father, would come to the earth as the Comforter, and the date is predicted in the stars as January 11th, 1944 at 2:22 a.m. on the east coast of Australia, Sydney, Australia to be exact. Right, so what we can do, we can locate the precise position of the sun, and with that older program on the date of June the 17th, 2 BC at 8 in the morning. Now, we notice first off that the sun position is 26.46 north by 88.8 degrees east. So there's your Jesus number, 888. Now, measuring from my birth location, it is a heading of 312.72. So what I've done, which I'll show you in drawings in a moment, so you who are listening, you should go and look at this. We are positioning the sun as it was at that date, at a moment in time, which is when Venus and Jupiter aligned. So we have a place somewhere on the earth, and I've shown it here at 26.46 degrees north by 88.8 east, which is the Jesus number. And then measuring from my birth location at a heading of 312 degrees, which is 312, which is my name, Brian Leonard Golightly Marshall. Why? Brian is 44 in English, Leonard is 69, Golightly is 115, and Marshall is 84. And Marshall at 84 is the same value as Emmanuel in English, also 84. Now the 3127, which is the bearing in degrees, the word is Yonaketh. It's a feminine of 3126. It's a sprout, a tender branch, a young twig. Now, to find this, you go through your Bible, and unless you've got computers these days, it'll take a very long time. I did this by hand years ago, by the way. So I wore out 2 Strong's Concordance books by flicking through the pages till finally it was all worn away. Job 7. Now, Job is accurate for the most part. For there is hope of a tree, if it be cut down, that it will sprout again, and that the tender branch therefore will not cease. Number 8, through the root thereof wax old in the earth, and the stock thereof die in the ground, yea, yet through the scent of water it will bud, and bring forth boughs like a plant. But man dieth and wasteth away, yea, man giveth up the ghost, and where is he? As the waters fail from the sea, and the flood decayeth and drieth up, so man lieth down and raiseth not till the heavens be no more. So what's we saying here? When is the heavens no more? Was it 1944? They shall not awake, nor be raised out of their sleep until then. Oh, that thou wouldst hide me in the grave, that thou wouldst keep my secret until thy wrath is past, that thou wouldest appoint me a set time and remember me. So in other words, he's saying, you're in the grave, you're not going to be raised up until God remembers you. He says, if a man dieth, shall he live again? All the days of my appointed time will I wait till my change come. Well, he's answering the question. He will, when his change comes from the dead back to life. That is in number 14. Number 15, thou shalt call and I will answer thee. Thou wilt have a desire to the work of thine hands. So Job was an Essene. Methuselah was an Essene. Noah was an Essene. His father Lamech was an Essene. And his grandfather Enoch was an Essene. Why? Well, Enoch, he ascended without dying at 365 years according to the Bible. And the exact moment was 365.2424 years, because that's the base of the Great Pyramid, which is the altar to the Lord, according to another Essene, which was Isaiah. Now, the oldest book of the Bible is not Genesis. That's been arranged because it's the largest book. Right? Then it's followed by the 4 books of Exodus, Deuteronomy, and the other bullshit books of the first 5 books, or the first 4 books after. And if you've been listening or watching any of the videos before, I said the word Lord is found in 6,666 verses, thanks to King James and Edward de Vere William Shakespeare, who organised it so that it would read 6666, which is the Babylonian numbering system, meaning that this thing is a Babylonian numbered book. Therefore, Solomon had 666 talents of gold per year from his Ammonite and Moabite wives, which are descended from Lot. He himself was born out of fornication, of death, after the husband of Bathsheba had been murdered by King David, who was too lazy to go to the battlefront himself, and he got his leading commanders to put the husband of Bathsheba in the front line so he'd get killed. So he was a murderer at that point. So anything that come out of his loins, biblically speaking, has to be evil. Solomon was evil. Right? Simple as that. So what we do is we go back to who was he had 8 wives, David. So who was the wife, the one he loved the most, the righteous one? And out of that came Nathan, which is the genetic line down to the Irish line of kings, the Scottish line of kings, and of course to the people living in Cornwall at the time leading up to the birth of Mary, who was also, it was a virgin birth through her mother Anna. It's recorded as that is. Now, it doesn't matter whether you believe it or not. What you believe doesn't matter. I'm just telling you how it is. So, he's saying then that the sun position, at the moment Jupiter and Venus align, was longitude 888. Jesus. Well, it's pretty obvious. But we can do also at the same time locate the position of the moon. So what we have here is the number before, if you see the distance to 1521.41748.09 kilometres. Well, the 1521 is the length of the passage going into the Queen's Chamber. And if you go to the pyramid today, these bastards want $2,000 US to go into the Queen's Chamber. Right? So there's the numbers I was referring to before. You can see it. The length is 4950.4 nautical miles. and then you got the heading of 312.71. So we read the Greek 1521 to introduce, bring or lead into, and Hebrew is the river of paradise. So clearly it is telling us that Jesus will reincarnate. The sun position from my rebirth location is a heading of 312. Now, as this was written many years ago, then the concordance wasn't put together till the 1830s, and that took a long time with 100 scholars. Once that was eventually made known, then the Freemasons, because it's a Freemason Bible, realised that they had been set in a trap by the numbers. There's a close-up of it, 4950.4 nautical miles at a heading of 312.71. So the heading was from my birth home, which is, again, very, very obvious who the devil is. 105 Rothschild Avenue, Rosebery, Sydney, Australia. Now, Rosebery was a Prime Minister of England. He married the wealthiest woman, which was a Rothschild. Right? And that's how they started to take over the English from very, very early on. Now, in Hebrew, we have the active participle, as they call it, the 3243, as a sucker, hence a twig of a tree felled and sprouting. The cedar tree represents royalty. Cut off at the tree at the roots, it will grow a new tree. So will a vine of a grapevine. Or a fallen tree lay on the ground, and from its side sprouts many new trees. Now, I worked in Canada, and just where I was living, there were cedar trees, old cedar trees that had fallen over, and there'd be several small cedar trees growing at the side of it, where it had fallen in the bush. Isaiah 53:1, who hath believed our report? Now remember, he's an Essene. And to whom is the arm of the Lord revealed? For he shall grow up before him as a tender plant. This is in the future. And as a root out of a dry ground, which is the earth, it's dry ground, everything's been dried up with Christianity and the bullshit they go on with, because they're all... I think what you should do at this point is go on YouTube and look up Regions of Saturn. The original book was written by a man called Williamson, Jonathan Williams, and he was one of the commanders in the army of Washington, and he wrote the book under eyewitness of a conversation with General Cornwallis, who was a British general who had surmisedly been defeated by Washington. In actual fact, it wasn't. They was there first off to kill as many as they could, and then make it appear that Washington had won, and then they pull out. But he tells him, in 200 years' time, the bastion of righteousness and freedom will be the United States, and it will be preaching, however, the Jewish Bible. So they were all Jews. They were Freemasons, which are Jews, and they don't know it. And Washington himself was a Freemason. Most all of the founding fathers were Freemasons. And the Constitution is to protect them, not to protect you. You've been very confused if you think the Constitution's got anything to do with freedom of people. It's not. They were slave traders. Now, he is despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief, and we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised, and we esteemed him not. So, we're talking about the future, and he's using the tense of we. So therefore, Isaiah is back as well. He's talking about his own reincarnation. Surely he hath borne our griefs and carried our sorrows, yet we did not esteem him stricken, smitten of God, and afflicted. But he was wounded for our transgression. This is now going back to 33 AD. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. All we like sheep have gone astray. We have turned away, one to his own way, different religions and beliefs. And the Lord hath laid on him the iniquity of all. So Number 5 is talking about the crucifixion. Number 6 is talking about now. Number 4 is talking about now. Number 3 is talking about now. So you have to know how to read it. There are codes in it which are too complex for you to understand, so I won't go there. He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. This is going back to 33 AD. As is brought as a dumb lamb to the slaughter, and as sheep before his shearers is dumb, so he opened not his mouth. And why is that? Well, the stupidity of the Moses laws was that if you, and you look at your Talmud, if you want to do evil, go to another city and do it. Don't do it to your own people and blah, blah, blah. So it's a very sneaky thing. So you go off and you do all your child molesting or whatever things you do, and the Talmud says it's okay. And if you do a sin, do it somewhere else. Don't do it around your own home. Then you can go into your temple and you can take the sin that you've got and you can put it on the, as long as you bring forth a lamb, the most expensive lamb you've got, the one without blemish, for your breeding stock, you sacrifice it by imparting the sin that you have done onto the lamb, and then the priest will take the lamb and cut its throat. Now it's a wool is the point here. The white wool of the unblemished lamb is then stained with the blood, which inside the body of the lamb is your sin. Now there's a real bright idea, isn't it? So the moron Lucifer, the god of Moses, is so stupid it can't see your sin being put onto the lamb in the first place, nor can it see the sin after the blood has been cut from its throat and gone over the garment of the sheep. This is where the garment comes in, with the garment that was cast lots upon by the Romans as they were waiting for Jesus to die, and they parted his garments, and then they had one robe that was put on him by the high priest that was without seam. That represented the skin of the penis, and because it doesn't have a seam. The crown of thorns represented circumcision. Now, what happens then is the garment is now red. It's covered in blood. So we have the Jesus figure that has been crucified as the Lamb of God to fulfill the laws of Moses, because they're so stupid, but in fulfilling the law of Moses enables it to create a form of belief that we today call Christianity, and include the Old Testament, because you've got to have the Old Testament, otherwise you wouldn't know what the point is of going to the cross, to know how stupid these people were. So that's what it's all about. So you've got to have it, but Christianity adopts every word of it as being the word of God, when half of it, and most of it, is the word of Satan. So even your New Testament Gospels, very suspect in many occasions, and has to be compared to the Essene original Gospels, where they plagiarized to form the 4 Gospels, and then Acts after that, and then so on. Even the book of Revelation is somewhat inspired, but it's not the original revelation of the Essenes. In the original Essene Revelation, it talks about how when John is shown what is happening in the future, one in particular, number 3, talks about how they have been given the ability to create, and what do the science of the world do? It creates nuclear weapons, and the nuclear fusion and plutonium, which is referred to in the book of Revelation, number 3, all about how they've taken the power of the sun and used it to burn people alive and turn their bones to charcoal, which is Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And now, because of the Samson option, the Jews, they're the ones that know absolutely that I'm back. And they know absolutely that they don't want the Christians to find out, or the Muslims to find out, or the atheists to find out. So what they're doing is destroying the world through radiation. So you say, all right, well, why not drop a bomb? Well, first off, you try to drop a bomb, the Yanks will see it coming, the Russians will see it coming, everyone else with any kind of technology will see it's coming. So don't do that. That's too obvious. It's the radiation from Fukushima that is far worse than a bomb being dropped. Because you don't want to destroy with one bomb, you want to destroy with hundreds. And they're called the likes of Fukushima, nuclear reactors all around the world. They've got in India, they're in Canada, they're in Europe, they're in France, they're in England. The only place they're not, that I know of, is in the southern hemisphere, because they're trying to protect the southern hemisphere, because this is where, if you go into the underground of the Australian Capital Territory, where the Parliament House is in Canberra, it's got all of the supercomputers there that is capable of running the entire Earth. I have seen the same thing prior to that being built in around 1998, when I went into the Commonwealth Bank to do a job for a fellow who had his staff, that he had no one that could work out how to fix this particular problem. And he asked me if I would do it, and I said, yeah, no worries. So when I go into it, we go into the basement of the Commonwealth Bank, and they've got this 2-story high computer with armed guards standing with the rifles across their chest, ready to shoot you, and these are Australian soldiers. There were 3 of them at a time. They were standing in front of this bulletproof glass, and I believe it was about 2 inches thick. So that was what they was doing then. So what they got today, you know. So he shall see the travail of his soul, and shall be satisfied. By his knowledge shall my righteousness, or righteous servant, justify many, for he shall bear their iniquities. So this is the idea of stopping the innocent being persecuted and punished by Lucifer for their sins, by taking on the role of the Lamb, of the unblemished Lamb, the Lamb of God. Stupid, but that's how it is. Therefore will I divide him a portion with the great, and he shall divide the spoil with the strong, because he hath poured out his soul unto death. Why? The soul is in the blood. And he was numbered with the transgressions, or transgressors. And he bare the sin of many, and made intercession for the transgressors. So here he is hanging on the cross, blood comes out. Now, this is where a little confusion over the Shroud of Turin comes in, which I've told all the researchers on the Shroud of Turin, because they don't ever listen, is that when the soul pours out, it's in the blood, and of course this is death, and the body, the flesh, is dead, but the soul isn't. And the soul then comes back into the tomb. Now, it's gone out, if you're looking at it from you're hanging off the cross, which way is the soul to leave? It goes straight out from you in all directions. So therefore, front and back. When it comes back into the body that's in the tomb, it goes through the shroud covering the body. So the image is on the outside of the shroud, not the inside, and that's pretty evident, because most of you have got your heart on the left side, and the Romans knew that. So when they speared me on the cross, it was in the left side, and therefore the soul bled out. First come blood, then water, proving death. And so the blood is gone, the soul is gone. The soul then comes back, same way, same orientation it went in, with the spear on the left side, and as it goes backwards into the body lying on the slab, it goes through the shroud, leaving the blood and the burnt image on the outside, not the inside against the body. It's not that hard, is it?